Start recording. Hello, my name is Daniel Hodab, and we are the facilitators of the Law of One YouTube Telegram group. And we have today another session with our amazing host, Gabriel Lugo. Hi, Gabriel.
Hey Daniel, thanks for the adjective of amazing. Um, so yeah, today we have session eight. Um, Infamous. I like to call it the infamous session eight for several reasons. And um, as I said in our group, I have very little that I could get into and contribute from this session. Uh, I'll just open by telling a little bit more of my um, background on these topics and how it evolved over time. I guess, this is something that can be helpful for anybody who is still, in a way, attracted to this type of information. So, a brief recap of session eight. There is a conversation that begins picking up from session seven when Don asked about UFOs, and Ra explains that these UFOs are, in parts, they are from our people, and in part from Orion. So Don decided to go on the line of inquiry about Orion, and he opens up, in essence, he doesn't open up the session, but the second question here is about, what do you mean that some of our people, humans, have UFOs? And so this is, all of the, I hate to use the term because those who are informed know that it's not an appropriate term, but conspiracy theory is what comes up, right? It is a sort of conspiracy, right? And we have learned about our governments and everything behind the scenes. And so that's what, in essence, opens up the majority of the session. And I think it's interesting actually to see Don struggling with accepting and understanding, that this is a true thing that's happening. And so we see a lot of that. Um, and yeah, the just the I guess the flavor of the session is all about talking about the details of how the government has, these crafts and so on. So when I first read this in, I'm going to say 2019, 2020, I was really interested, of course, in everything that was behind the scenes. And this is to say, of course, all the conspiracies and everything that was happening. And I had a background on this, meaning that not a background, but a backstory, being interested in what was happening behind the scenes. About 12 years or so, sort of vaguely interested in this. For a long period of those 12 years, I lost interest just because I felt that there was nothing I could do, and it was just depressing to get into these rabbit holes. So I lost interest, and now my with my I would call it my search, my seeking at that point in 2019, it it brought it up to the surface again. So I found a lot of good information, of course, in what Ross says at the moment. The thing is that this satisfied a lot of my curiosity that I had in terms of, conspiracy theories and what was behind the scenes. But at some point within the year, I started just losing interest in all these rabbit holes that are available for us to navigate. And so this is something that, again, I mention it because I want to honor the curiosity that we may have behind this. I have noticed over time that some people have zero interest in this, and yet they're very much into the law of one or spiritual seeking in general. But some of us were interested and have a deep curiosity about these topics. I did see over time, and this is no judgment, but just an observation of how we spend our energy, that some people will continue to invest a lot of their mental energy uh, for one reason or another into this. And I just want to say that I found it completely an obstacle in terms of where I wanted to direct my attention and my energy. So it's not something that I consider to be wrong or anything that I would tell people to avoid. I'm actually saying the opposite. If you're curious about this, you should really, get into it until you're, you either find your path or you, yeah, by just things falling away, you discover your path. So that's what happened to me. I just completely lost interest in all of these topics, and just my desire to seek went in the way of what Ross says, the law of one. I sometimes struggle with the right term to refer to. Is it the spiritual path? Is it the path of truth? Is it the law of one? Is it unity consciousness? Is it what is it? It's just this that we're doing. This that is alleviating all the disharmony that we have. So yeah, I found that these topics would just contribute more to a sort of agitation that wasn't I wasn't meant for that. So for that reason, I have very little to contribute in this session because it's all um, transit information, as Ross says, and I won't be reading anything other than the first question, which actually have an Easter egg. If you follow my channel, something interesting. I don't know what happened in session 8 for me that I didn't cover the first question. And it's funny because this is the only question that I find valuable right now. I have no idea why I didn't cover it. And in fact, when I did my recap after session 26, ending book 1, I did a recap of all the questions that I didn't cover because of the initial format that I started my podcast and my coverage of the raw material. So I said, I'm going to cover all the questions that I didn't. And for some reason, I didn't include this question. So this is the first time I'm actually talking about this question. And it's the most important of the whole session. So we discovered that in session 7, and I'll open with this, and then mention a couple of more questions that I kind of solidify my points and my stance on this at the end of the session. Um, but this is also to say, of course, that this call that we're doing right now is going to be a little bit different than the other ones that we have had, because I want to leave it to everybody to contribute or want to talk about this. Like I said, I'm happy to just sit here and listen or uh, answer any questions. It's not like I'm close to answering anything or talking about this, but I just don't find anything that can be helpful, at least in the direction that I want to interpret the law of one. But again, we'll open, I don't have much to contribute. I'll just mention this and then we can open the call for just anything, or we can change topics. We can talk about anything else. So it's up to the group's energy, I would say. But all right, this first question, why do I find it so valuable? In session 7, when we started reading the conversation between Don and Ra, there was an interesting approach to what this UFO, not contact or sighting, or just uh, the phenomenon that we call UFO in the sky. What was all this about? And that's where Ra said, okay, there is one intention by the Confederation, and then there are groups of people in your planets that are responsible for you seeing these things in the sky. And also, a part of it is Orion. Um, we discussed a little bit about the nature of Orion back then. There is some discussion here about Orion, which I won't get into because it's related to this sort of landing and so on. But then we talked about also this Confederation intention. Why do they provoke this? Why is this happening? We get to understand this deeper as we go along in the material, but this is related to it. And Don opens this session by saying, I have a question about what I call the advertising of the Confederation. Advertising meaning the appearance of crafts and possibly contact by other entities. It has to do with free will, this question about advertising of the Confederation. There have been certain contacts allowed, as I understand, by the Council, but this is limited because of free will of those who are not oriented in such a way that they could be or could maybe want contact. This material, what we are doing now, will be disseminated. Dissemination of this material will be dependent upon the wants of a relatively small number of people on the planet. Many people on the planet now want this material, but even though we disseminate it, they will not be aware it is available. Is there any possibility of creating some effect, which I would call advertising, or is this against the principle of free will? So I see Don's innocence here. It's so cute that he is, as far as I understand him, trying to create a sort of event that would be linked to the raw material and what they're offering here. It's such a noble, innocent desire that Don has because he wants to disseminate this material. And here we are talking about it 40 something years later, right? 43 years later. And that's what he's asking, is there anything, on free will here that will affect it? So that's his question. Can we create something that would be linked to the work that we're doing here and the law of one that you're giving us? So what does Ross say? I don't feel they answer his question directly, but they say, consider, if you will, the path your life experience complex has taken. Consider the coincidences and odd circumstances by which one thing flowed to the next. Consider this well. Each entity will receive the opportunity that each needs. This information source beingness does not have uses in the life experience complex of each of those among your peoples who seek. Thus, the advertisement is general and not designed to indicate the searching out of any particular material, but only to suggest the noumenal aspect of the illusion. Like I said, we'll get deeper into what this not so much the advertising, but more now the experience of having contact with other entities. This contact of, I forget, I don't know the nomenclature here, but of some kind where there is sort of visitation and just having this direct experience with entities or feeling like you're on other planets. This is also seen a lot in psychedelic experiences or experiences with entheogens. But that's what this was all about. This was to stir or stimulate the seeking towards mystery. I feel that we sometimes get caught in the experience a lot, and we want to, as curious humans, we want to dissect the experience. Who were those entities? Where are they from? What is their name? Why did they come here? And so on. So we kind of get lost in the mythology and lose the message. I think that's just something interesting. But these are not meant to be dissected that way, or at least that's not the intention. The intention is always to, as Ross says, to suggest the noumenal aspect of the illusion. The word noumenal comes from one of Nico's compatriots, I think, right? Immanuel Kant, if I remember correctly. And it's a way to describe the world beyond our senses, that which is more real than our senses. It's a sort of complicated philosophy, but in essence, It's just that which is not within our reach in perception. So it's an invitation to explore deeper into that which is beyond the physical world. And as Ra has suggested several times, what is the biggest mystery? The self, the creator, and that's you. So you, some of you know, or a good portion of you already know that my preferred method of explaining and going into the spiritual path is the direct path. So the direct path leads us to precisely that, to investigate the nature of our being, to investigate the nature of the self, that which we call I. And that is the true mystery. So even these phenomena that we see either in the skies or in the backyard or while sleeping or having some mystical experience, their ultimate purpose is to stir up that curiosity that we have to the deepest portions of what we're seeking, what we're looking for, why are we so motivated to live? Why are not committing suicide? Why do we not commit suicide? It's a strong question, right? But it's the truth. We like to live. That's the real answer to it. I like my life. Well, the question is, why do you like it so much? Go deeper into that question. Um, so this is, and you can see the beginning, the paragraph, the first paragraph, when they say, consider the path your life experience complex has taken. You can look at synchronicities here when we look back at our lives and we say, oh, that's the reason why everything, I have lived. And this is a sort of integration phase in our lives. We see this and we say, oh, yes, this makes sense. You have no resentment. You're at that point where there is no uh, no looking back at your life with any sort of negativity. Consider the coincidences and odd circumstances by which the one thing flow to the next. That's what I'm referring to. Each entity will receive the opportunity that each needs. So this is to say that all experiences that we have, of course, are promoting, in essence, this one path. And it's just a matter of us, picking that path and following it through. That's why I said even this material, which is it's open to the curiosity of the seeker to say, I'm going to get into that rabbit hole. There's a reason why you're so interested in that. So I think, if anything, I would just say that question 1 in session 8 is the most valuable if we can just reread it over and over again, to just echo what I also posted in the group chat. In question 25, Don continues after 20-something questions going on different topics, up and down, left and right, on the whole UFO phenomena. Finally, Ron says, may I at this time reiterate that this type of information is very shallow and of no particular consequence compared to the study of the law of one. And so I stand by Ra here by saying that this is all, as fascinating as it may be to our limited perception of the self, it is it's not even minuscule. It's insignificant compared to the energy that we end up spending investigating the one, the self. There's one part, and this is just the extent of what I was able to extract out of this session. But they were talking about Dan Fry, who had this type of contact, by the way. And I'll just read this to finish up, and then open the conversation. But Dan Fry had I'm going to call it a mystical experience in which there was this quote unquote contact with the Confederation. Yes. And Ross says the one known as Daniel was, in thought form, transported by Confederation thought form. It's a very important distinction here. A lot of you have already solved this puzzle, and it's that you're not traveling your physical vehicle, you're not being placed inside a craft and taken away, but rather it's a thought form. So it's happening. This sounds so out of context, but yes, it's happening inside your mind, and yet the world is inside your mind as well. If you can pick that up, you'll understand what I mean. So some people get upset when they hear that, oh, you see, you're saying that it's happening inside my mind, so it's not really happening. This is a terrible misconception that we have in our consensus reality to say that there is inside mind and there is outside world. So no, this is all happening inside you. There is no other place in which things happen. They always happen in you. So Daniel was not Hoda, but Fry. He was transported. As far as we know, we don't know Daniel. You have to come through. Be honest. What happened? So he was transported by Confederation thought form vehicular illusion. That's a mouthful. Thought form vehicular illusion. In order to give this mind body spirit complex data so that we might see how this type of contact aided your people in what? So far, what I've said is Daniel Fry had a mystical experience in which we of the Confederation wanted to test how this type of contact would aid in what? In uncovering, in the uncovering of the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. Any possible thought that we have is limited. That's the nature of it. So behind all thought, all form, all shapes, all colors, all definition, what is behind? Or rather, what is prior to? Intelligent infinity. So we see again the same leitmotif here, which is everything that the Confederation or a positive contact does is to push you to look in that direction, or whatever you want to give that coordinates direction, which is the self, the ultimate mystery, intelligent infinity. So even this, in this example, we see the same thing, the noumenal aspect of the illusion. And I love how they put it here. They say uncovering the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. Every mental activity is what we call an illusion because it is a limitation of the infinite. You can see the paradox there. How can the infinite be limited? It can't. And yet it perceives itself that way to know itself. So behind all of the illusion, right? Beyond the experience, the reptilians and the, Pleiadians and Ra and so on, behind all your conceived ideas, identities, and so on. There's always one background, and it's the same background for everything. We call it in non-duality, at least in the language that I like to call it, awareness, pure, simple awareness. So, yeah, we once again see that this is where the law of one is leading us. Behind all of the other topics that are discussed across the whole material, 106 sessions. And I don't have the quote here, but isn't it funny that this ended in session 106 with Ra saying, in essence, that the only useful thing is to look beyond shape and shadow to the one. I'm paraphrasing, but it's the recurrent message of the law of one. Fanned out, flourish in different topics and different ways to approach it. Call it Kundalini, call it depthhood, disciplines of the personality, whatever it may be. All the messages just to go back to that simple, not even simple, but effortless recognition of being. So again, this is all I have for today. Actually, it took longer than I thought I might, but that's all that I found valuable in session 8. Open for group discussion.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think there is a lot of stuff to discuss about what you just said, and I don't know even where to start. So, as nobody have raised his or her hand so far, so I will just share my thoughts on that. So, as we talked in the beginning about the UFOs, from my personal perspective, is I also not much so deep interested in where they appear, how they work, and but for me, simply I have accepted that they're there from different sources, from our own how you want to call it, secret space program, dark fleet, or whatever I want to call it. But for me, it doesn't make any difference because if they're there or if they're not there, so it doesn't have much impact on my life yet. So for many people, it is very important if the government turns out is true. So there are some, what we call it, light disclosure in US currently going on with Austin said about it in Prague last year and mentioned also something in the Kentucky gathering about it. They make a nice presentation. But I would leave it up to the seekers, participants, how many energy you put into it. For me, it's fine, it's nice, but it has no much impact on my daily life. So for me, they are there. I have accepted this. I don't talk much about it, and while I'm talking, there are already 2 raised hands. So I will continue later. So and will give the word to Nico now.
All right, thank you very much. So, first of all, Gabe, thank you so much for your beautiful thoughts on session 8. And there was one thing in particular that Daniel, you're still shown in full screen for some reason, at least in my end. There's one thing in particular that really made me go like, oh, that's interesting. And that was when you said that any possible thought that we could have is limited. How about the following? The thought, who am I? Is that a limited thought or an unlimited thought?
Yeah, it's a beautiful question, Nico. So yeah, all thought is limited because for it to be a thought, there needs to be some delineation to it. In our minds, we don't have to conceptualize it. We don't have to define anything. Just know that in the fields that you call you, right? And this is beautiful because it touches perfectly with the I, right? What do you mean when you say I? What are you referring to? Are you referring to an image? Is it a feeling? So when you look deep into it, I refers to a field, a medium, a sort of space, whatever you want to call it. Anything that we say, obviously, it's just a word. And yet the feeling of I is just unlimited. So I see the question, who am I, as the closest loop possible of thought processes. You see what I mean? So if I say, what kind of human am I? There's so many assumptions there, right? What kind of father am I? There's a lot of assumptions there. There's a long trail that we need to circle back, to get into a sort of definition. But the interesting thing is that when you say, who am I? The question is coming from a point of confusion. So you have already come out of yourself, so to speak. You have objectified yourself into something that is asking the question. And so I call it, yes, it's the closest or shortest loop that comes out of being and questioning, who am I? Right? What am I? What is this? From there, we begin to unfold many answers and ways to describe. We're humans, we are souls, we are God, we're so. All of this really is just limitations and forms. So this is not meant to be said as a conceptual understanding, of course. It's meant to just redirect the question itself, just brings you to, well, why do I refer, where do I go to check that I am? What is that? So yeah, the question is, rather the thought is limited. The answer should be a feeling, which we should all explore. And that's it. That's the key of mysticism. It's not complicated. In fact, the most basic complication is the question, who am I? And it should die right away, in the feeling, not I am as a thought, because even the I am as a thought is a mental process. I am. If you are, why do you have to say it? You are, you know it. So it's self-knowing. I is self-knowing. So yeah, I love your question, Nico, because it's the closest thing. Yes, it's still limited. The thought always will be limited. That which thought, in this case, refers to, appears in, and it is made by, is the answer. And the answer has no objectivity, is the eye through which everything is seen, and yet it doesn't see itself.
Wow, that was a very beautiful explanation, shedding light on so many things that I had not considered when I asked this question. So thank you very much for that. So it's not the goal of the thought that makes the thought limited, but rather the nature of the thought, because the entity thinking the thought, the fact that the entity is there means that there is some delineation in there, some boundary to other entities, such that each individual entity can make a thought, and hence it's limited. Is that roughly what you were suggesting?
That's beautiful. I don't think I could have said it so succinctly and accurate. Yes. It's all thought is limited. All questions arise from a confused self, and yet abiding in the self that asks the question is really the resolution of all paradoxes, as Ross says. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you, Nico, for the amazing question. Then the next one is Josh. Hello, Josh.
Hi, everyone. Are you able to hear me? There's some background noise happening, but can you hear me well?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. These noise cancellation is great. Just want to thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dave, and everybody. This has been a wonderful discussion and to hear and to be a part of. I have so many thoughts and questions and discussion points that I could be chatting for days, so I'll try to keep it succinct, as you said. But a couple things is maybe for later. I had an experience last 2 nights ago. I would say like my first visual, like externally visual observation of what maybe you would refer to as the advertisement of seeing some light in the sky. that were kind of unexplainable. Myself, I've never seen things personally prior to 2 days ago. But in terms of this conversation you're having about awareness, we've spoken, I like these topics and I see what you mean, I think. But a question for you, and awareness, would you say before or prior or under awareness would be what I think Ra calls consciousness? That all is consciousness? Is that prior to awareness? Do you have a conscious awareness, but before that, you just have like raw materials of consciousness that everything manifests from and with?
Let me see first if I got the question right, Josh, because it was a little bit muddled, the sound. But you want to inquire into awareness and what is prior to awareness, and what is it that makes awareness? Is that where the question, is that close to what you were asking?
Yeah, that's close to what I was asking. Basically, simply, would you say that consciousness is the prior to awareness?
Okay.
And I don't
So-
mean consciousness, sorry, I don't mean consciousness in the sense of like our cultural definition of consciousness. I mean,
Yeah.
as far as Ra uses consciousness.
I gotta say, guys, thank you so much for going into this inquiry. It feeds my heart. So thank you for these questions. And I hope I can reciprocate what I feel when you guys are interested in this. Okay, so let me start with the boring part, which is semantics. And that helps to understand the vocabulary that we're using to refer to that which is provable in our experience, because we should relate everything to our experience. If it's not present in our experience, we're probably digressing too much into thoughts. So let's use the tool of thoughts, which is what I am able to elicit in you, to get really close to experience. Semantics. I myself have used the words consciousness and awareness interchangeably. The fact that we're using the raw material, it's not explicit, but sometimes we can see the use of consciousness and awareness plays in a way that we should have a hierarchy here, just like we have logos, sub-logos, sub-logos. Again, this is the boring part. We'll get to the experiential part in a minute. But let's define consciousness simply as that which we are conscious of, or that which contains something, right? We are conscious of a world. We can associate this also with, and I mean, I'm going a little bit deeper than we should, but the matrix in the archetypical mind, right? That's sort of like the projection where consciousness is. There's actually parentheses inside a parenthesis here. In non-duality, I have found in some discussions that there is a problem that people don't seem to understand, and kind of debate about consciousness, and is it consciousness infinite? Is it limited? They use in Sanskrit two words. The first one is vijnana, which means it's almost like discriminatory consciousness. And then there is chit, which means basically unlimited consciousness. So the way to reconcile this, and in fact, in the raw material, we see the same thing, is we use consciousness to that which, it's which we are aware of, and then awareness. Awareness is prior to consciousness. So that's the way we can reconcile this. There is awareness, and that's the word I'm using, and then there is consciousness. It's almost like awareness is conscious of something. But again, in many ways, you'll find this interchangeable. And now to the practical parts. Ross says that the first thing in creation is infinity. Infinity is the creation. And also, they say that the next step was infinity became aware. What would it become aware of in the first or initial stage? Of itself. It can only be aware of itself, right? From that comes the three distortions, primal distortions of the law of one. And so if there is anything prior to awareness, and it's not prior as a sequence, but rather its nature is infinity, as Ross says. So the first thing known is infinity. Infinity becomes aware, which in some contexts we can see that awareness actually is free will. The fact that you are aware means that you are free will. Notice that I said you are free will, not that you have free will. That's a beautiful distinction that we can integrate within. There is no self that has free will, but rather the self is free will. And then we go to the next primal distortions. So if we get really close to the experience of awareness and infinity, well, let's see what the difference is between awareness and infinity. None whatsoever, because infinity is the background through which everything is known, out of which everything is made, and by which it is known. So it's all in one, not to sound cliche, but that's it, you see? And it's an experience that we're all so familiar with. We're so intimately familiar with awareness that we just take it for granted. And it's there, we don't know anything but awareness. Everything we know is because we are aware of it. So to link, to me, Josh, and this is what I love about your question, to link awareness, which I've never been without, none of you have been without. You might have been aware of being aware, and at that point you are aware of nothing, because infinity looks like nothing or everything. To link awareness to infinity is to truly know the nature of yourself. You are infinity. So yeah, it begs again the investigation into the nature of ourselves. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Gabe. If I may share a response, that I love everything you said. However, I would argue that infinity, in the way context that you use the term in your dictionary, right? Remember, infinity in my dictionary is also representing consciousness in that hierarchy or in that progression of evolution. That I agree with you that anything we in our third density mind body spirit complex perspectives have experienced is through our awareness, is through the free will that we are. However, reading books and studying philosophy and concepts, you can think of, imagine things that you're not. So the first step is infinity. Then infinity became aware. You said it became aware of itself, of awareness. I see it became aware of what was. It became aware of infinity. It became aware of consciousness. Just like you said in the Matrix, it's the background, it's the foundation, it's the building material. That's what I argue in your context that infinity would be kind of like matrix, which I think Ra uses the term consciousness as well. You know, there's many, all is one. So on one level, yes, all is one. But I see the difference between consciousness and aware consciousness or conscious awareness. And not on a human perspective, but pre-illusion, you know. But I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I'll just add something. We can get lost in terms, and in the end, yes, everything refers to the one thing. At the end, it's just saying, why are we even discussing this? But there's a part actually in which I guess for contemplation. I'll leave this. Ra said that the infinity of spirit is greater than the is it the infinity of spirit is greater than the infinity of consciousness or something like that? That's where you see that, you know, there is, depending on how you want to talk about this, you will create holographic iterations of the same thing. But yeah, we're talking about the same thing. I just like to simplify it to what we know. What we know is that we are aware. And when we look at awareness, when we look at anything, anything is limited. Awareness is the only thing that is not limited. Whatever awareness in your mind refers to, but to all of us, it refers to the same thing. So, yeah. I could keep going back and forth, you know this, Josh, and I love it. So, but I think Jay has to comment or question something.
Yeah, I just wanted to input some of my 2 cents on I think something Nico said and something that Josh said. Which Josh, I agree. I believe that's a good question. So when we use the words consciousness, awareness, space, medium, God, knowing, these for the most part they're all synonymously used and interchangeable when, you know, conveying certain parts of the non-dual understanding. But my way of expressing, if you, whoever is knowing their experience, or whatever is conscious, by definition is aware, and vice versa. If you are aware of your experience, then you are knowing it, and whatever is knowing their experience is obviously conscious. So it's kind of a interplay of words, and you just have to use your own discernment and discretion when, you know, playing or, you know, trying to understand. But yeah, that's just my take on that. And Nico, you know, brought up one of the most famous, you know, ways of self-inquiry, which is the infamous question, who am I? And this question can actually, I've actually in my own teachings have started, I started, you know, using the question with others, you know, who am I? But if we actually look at the question, who am I, this can lead to different types of confusion in the seeker, because, you know, when we're posed with the question, who am I? You know, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the body? Are we talking about the mind? Or are we talking about an image or a sensation? So there's multiple ways to practice this self-inquiry, and the approach that I seek to like myself would be the question, who or what is it that is aware of my experience? Or we can just simply say, am I aware? And when we ask this question, you know, something interesting happens. We go directly to the experience of being aware. And who or what is it that knows that I'm aware? Well, that would be awareness. So yeah, that's all I really have. I just wanted to touch base and put my input on those two things.
Okay, so you sort of linked the two together, my question and Josh's. Thank you.
Oh, all right then. I raised my hand and then I put it down and now I'm ready. But I'm going to talk about consciousness and the I am, because I really like this conversation between Gabriel and Josh. And I'm going to go back to an analogy that I've used quite a lot recently, and it's the box. So if we imagine ourselves as a box, us, and you know, we're ourselves as like these balls bouncing around the box. We are the balls bouncing around the box, but we're the space in which the balls are bouncing around as well. And if we think of ourselves as that space, I see that as consciousness. And then if we extend that and see the box as not completely solid, but as made of chicken wire, that space then extends infinitely. And that is consciousness. And it extends infinitely outwards and inwards, because if we go down to the single atom, the atom is made of, you know, the neutrons and the protons and the nucleus, and there's space there as well. So that space just goes in and in and in, and it goes out and out and out. And we are that space as well as the material. We are the space between the objects as well as the objects, as well as matter. And that helps me to perceive oneness, and it's the consciousness. And another way of putting it is like, we're the screen on which the projection is cast, but without the projection, the screen is still there and the projection changes. So we are the image, but we are the host that harbors the image as well. And I see that as consciousness. And awareness could be used interchangeably, but awareness is more about the individual. And as our awareness deepens, it then merges with the conscious, if that makes sense. And then as for the I am, I feel like anything that comes after the I am is very limited. So if I can just sit there with I am and be with amness, I am whole. I am part of everything. But if I put any word at all, you know, whether it's a good or bad word, it then builds a cage for myself. So if I say I am nice, there's a whole series of expectations and behaviors that's associated with nice, and that becomes a cage then. But if we can stay with just the I am, then our ability to perceive the infinite is enhanced then. So yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for sharing. It's an interesting analogy. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, I really liked what you said, Andy. I think I was thinking along the lines of you as well in that thing. And you reminded me of something I wanted to say the first time when you said about this image and the screen and the one reflecting or observing that screen. screen being consciousness, and the one observing it being awareness, which creates the entity itself, intelligent infinity. But it's just like quantum physics with the particle wave duality. You have, with no observer, it's in the quantum state. It's a wave. When the researcher comes in and turns on the sensor and is observing this wave, it becomes particles, the photon emitter. Instead of waves, it becomes particles. So I see it like that before there was an observer, there was what the observer will observe. And I see that as, again, it's all just semantics, it's all just words, it's not important, but I see that as consciousness. So you have infinite, and then so it's almost as if you have that screen or you have some object, and the object is, when there's a mirror brought around and then the view comes into view, you have infinity. Whatever infinity is my hand. And then when awareness begins to emerge out of infinity and it gets into the view of this perspective, it loops around 180 degrees, then it sees itself and acquires, or awareness emerges out of the self-reflection of infinity, seeing infinity, becoming intelligent infinity. And again, it's just words. We all know the law of one, but that's, just wanted to share that my perspective on the first step in creation, as Ra puts it. At first there was infinity, and then infinity became aware. And that's the first distortion. So we're talking pre that, but I'll stop talking.
Thank you very much, Josh. And then we go to Ishan. Hey, welcome, Ishan.
Hello, everyone. This is a very interesting talk you guys are having. If I may reflect upon the nature of consciousness, can I begin?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, my understanding of what consciousness is the creator created all of this that we are seeing all around us. So, at the point when the creator became individuated portions of consciousness that we all are, sitting, in the other corners of the world, having this, mutual experience. So when the creator individuated itself, it individuated itself in all the densities and all the structures and all everything that is created all around us. So it does not happen in a linear way. It happened in a hierarchical manner. So first of all, it was the pure consciousness, the creator itself, that is, one unified whole, that is the basis of the law of one. So that is the oneness that exists all around us. So when that oneness, it started creating itself, as Josh was putting up, and intelligent infinity became aware. Infinity became aware and formed intelligent infinity. It is the point that creator started experimenting with itself and started creating, various forms and various, experiments in experiencing himself. And in those, ways, he kind of separated himself and created a thing which is which can receive experience. So creator has a tendency to give because it is the source, but to for making all of us to able to experience as a creator, this experience of creator, we need to be able to receive, and thus he created a property which is called the desire to receive. So it has developed onto the various hierarchical manners in the layers of consciousness. So within the pure consciousness where everything is one, it branches out to all of those areas, where the light, starts to create, logo starts to create, and then there are different individuated portions of consciousness we as souls then come into this, incarnation where we are veiled and where we don't know that we are the source itself and everything is emerged out from itself. So in this form where we can, kind of look within and then see that where we came from and experience that, ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, that is the creator, is the ultimate truth. And when we are able to see that, it is the point this design of reality was intended for, so that we can know where we came from and we can then savor the delight, the pleasure of, knowing our true nature. That is, we are, the creator, we are the infinite. And this creator that has created everything, in the primordial form, we are that thing. That is the pure consciousness. And in that, everything emerges out. In that, everything we see around itself, first of all, in that space, our mind emerges. And when the, mind emerges out in the time space, it becomes a basis for our soul. And it is then carries out itself into this 3D reality, and then we have a body. And this is how dense, this hierarchical structure is. And I think this is that point where everything is happening in that space. It is the clearing in which all things arises. It is that space, openness, emptiness, and your true self in which everything emerges out. Your thoughts, your emotions, your sensations, your feelings, and everything. So that clearing, that pure, consciousness, that pure openness is the consciousness. And it is identical to a light, the light which has no color, it has no luminescence, and no quality in itself, but it has the ability to be able to aware of it itself, and to be able to aware of things around others, and to be able to create and emerge from itself. So I think it is the consciousness in my experience.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective on that. Wonderful. Lynn wanted to say something.
Yeah, if we are talking conscious and awareness, one thing one day occurred to me when I staring at my cell phone, so standby, but not switch on. We all have a cell phone. We look on that, it's dark in the screen. I love you guys mentioned about the projector. Before the cell phone, there's nothing, it's black. So I said, okay, this is could kind of infinite. It has its conscious, but we are not something we don't know, because it's if not switch on, it's dark, it's nothing. But in the nothingness is everything. If we finger on that, all the apps show on, we can watch film, whatever, So it's a whole bunch of words come just from that projector into reality. So we are working, we talk, we watch film, whatever with the cell phone. But once we switch off, it's back to the infinite nothingness and everythingness. So along with the iPhone, that's my iPhone, one day I got the infinite awareness, So that is, the moment I got what is infinite switch off. In my cell phone, there's everything in, So I love you guys mentioned the projector, which remembered me one day, one moment, I got the sense. And another practice I feel good is self-inquiry. To ask, who am I? Who am I? If we go deeper, I'm a mom, and I'm a sister, yes, but what is else? Is really you, then we go deeper, come then to one stage, you are nothing. You are just that. So the self-inquiry meditation, I feel, is quite helpful to sense in human body with availing the I'm nothing and I'm everything, come to the stage. There's just very slight awareness there. Yeah. Okay, this is my part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you. I always appreciate your thoughts on that. So, Gabriel, it's time to
Yeah.
get your reflection on the things were said.
Yeah, I love that we have been gravitating around this experience, this recognition of what is not even, you see, yeah, we have been directing it to the source of everything. I, myself, awareness. I am awareness. I am consciousness. And this is, as Lynn was saying just now, it's a beautiful inquiry that after a while, it loses its mantra-like quality of being a repetitive thought in our minds, but rather it elicits already the answer. You see, we begin to live through the answer before asking the question. The question becomes meaningless at some point. And that's the place where even, I'm just going to say words because I can't do anything else, but instead of I am, there is, or is, there is isness. I think somebody said this already. But you see, that's the last collapse that is needed in duality. Yeah, we can, that's why I said, to have a structured conversation about it and to be more efficient, it's always helpful to clarify some terms. It's funny because in Spanish, for example, a lot of you guys know that I do this in English and Spanish. We don't have such a word as to distinguish consciousness and awareness. I mean, we do, but nobody really cares, especially when you say the word, unless you're a Spaniard, you'll be able to differentiate this. And not to bore you with these details, but in Spanish, we have consciousness with an NSC, and that refers to awareness. Almost nobody knows that. And then there is consciousness or conciencia. It's pronounced the same way, again, unless you're Spaniard, and then you make right use of pronunciation. The vast majority of us are not. But that refers to, yeah, I think Josh said it right. He's not confusing it with, oh, you're a conscious person, that type of consciousness. But it refers to that. And I have begun to use in the written form, the distinction between the two, especially translating the raw material. I had to do this. And, I find that this is a helpful distinction because again, my heart is settled in Eastern philosophy, and they refer to consciousness, consciousness through the six senses. That's what they refer to as consciousness. And then awareness is that which is the ultimate reality. So regardless of what words we use, as long as we can make that distinction that there is the ultimate self, and then there is the relative self. That's all there is. And in terms of the analogy of the screen, I love it. I have found that is the modern, probably for the past 100 years, analogy that we have been using in our non-dual teachings. But prior to that, it was water. We used to call this water. Yeah. The ultimate reality is water. Its movement is relative. When you look at awareness like that as a medium, because the screen sometimes leaves, and I think that's the part that we lose a little bit on the screen. I'm not saying that it's superior or not. It's a little bit modern for us and we can relate to it, but you kind of get like a flat screen. But water is a medium. And if you see awareness as you being that, which is moving and it's modulating itself, it's this motion, that's really it. You have no two different things. And so we can collapse everything. See? So I like to play back and forth with these two when I talk about this. But the experience, the unequivocal experience of being that's what really merges everything into just this, which no thought, no word. There's just this. And yeah, towards the end of the conversation, I'll definitely go back to this, but those are my 2 cents based on what everything has contributed. And thank you guys for bringing this to the surface, and no pun intended.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. It was indeed a beautiful session with a good exchange of thoughts and perception. I much like it. So I think we are almost on the end of our session. So I would just ask if anyone have a comment before we close, then we should do it now. Otherwise, I would ask Gabriel, what you say already said some almost some closing words. So maybe you could give us a small forecast for next week.
I actually don't. I forgot to read session 9, so I'm not sure what's coming up. I do remember that Don said that we're gonna go, or he said no, we're not gonna concentrate on that topic, but we're gonna move along with the law of one. I think Ishan wants to say something before we close.
Yeah, go ahead, Ishan.
I would like to add a small phrase, closing phrase to this conversation that refers to the Hindu tradition and their concept that refers to the ultimate reality as Sat, Chit, and Anand. So Sat means existence, Chit means consciousness, and Anand means bliss. So the ultimate reality is existence, consciousness, and bliss. So let's rejoice in the love and the light.
Thank you very much, Ishan. Yeah, I'm very happy today about the conversation which was taking place in our study group. I'm much excited that we are growing and have participants from around the world. I'm very happy, and I'm also very happy that Gabriel give us the opportunity and the possibility to exchange our thoughts and reflection of the material. Thank you very much, Gabriel, and I'm looking much forward to next week.
Thank you, Daniel.
Mm.